I'm
you
Dennis. Yes, I'm Dennis.
Oh, well, I'm John.
I'm Dennis and you're John.
Together.
We've been fostering children.
And dogs.
And dogs for nearly 20 years.
Nearly 20. Actually, one of them is a bit of an issue with spices, so...
John and Dennis have different personalities. John is larger than life.
I've got to paddle over.
When you want things done, you go to John.
Make sure that
Dennis is the quiet, soulful one.
That's always a favourite.
Together they make quite a team. I was number one. I was the original. I got the ball rolling for them. I didn't make their life easy, and despite this, they decided to take on another one.
Hey, Miss Lou, how are you? Good, how are you?
How are you going?
I was number two child, and I think by the time I came along, John and Dennis had already figured out that it wasn't easy to be looking after teenage girls.
I know.
Miss Pinky Pink, everything has to be pink.
Yeah, but it's not anymore though.
Yeah, it's a nice colour.
John and I do things differently, but when it comes to children, we always have a united front.
We called John the bad cop and Dennis the good cop.
Yes.
It was a bit like a revolving door. One of us would leave and the other one would come through. Not long after me came Caitlin.
No, all good, I can get myself there. Yeah, I'm just finishing work now. Living in John and Dennis was a lot better than before because I could finally be a kid. After everything that I'd been going through and had experienced, it was just so nice to be able to settle into an ordinary family.
Morning. That was good timing. Well, a typical day in our household, you know, everybody's up at 6 o'clock.
We're not in a hurry.
It takes another 10 minutes. Always. Liam likes to leave for school at around 7, so he's leaping around looking for shoes and socks, whilst Hayley is still in repose in her room. Yeah, it's time. Get up.
Good morning, Hayley. Get up.
Hayley's 14. She's been with us for about 2 years. She's certainly coming out of her shell, which often happens with kids. Initially, when they come, they're shy, they stay in their room a lot.
Hayley! Chop chop! Over the years, Dennis and I have fostered and mentored probably over a dozen children.
No one.
Who is Joe?
Oh, he's one of my friends.
Look, some have stayed a short period of time, maybe a few weeks, couple of months, but others have stayed 5 or 6 years.
Really beautiful.
John spent a lot of his early life surrounded by other people's kids, and I think maybe it was just a natural flow on for him to want to foster children. He may not have known it yet, but it was coming. Well, I grew up in New Zealand, a little town called Albury. And it was a little village, a pub, general store and a post office, and a garage. John's mum, Marge, or Auntie Marge to the village, was one of those lovely women that when you think of her, you think of aprons and cooking, and she was always busy doing something for someone. She was a bit like a Pied Piper. Somebody was ill in the country, there was no help after school or anything like that, so Mum took over as that person. There was pretty much always somebody else's children staying in the house. John was 20 when he decided to leave New Zealand and pursue his career in Australia in design. He had some offers. I think he was around about 30 when he met Dennis.
Here's some ideas for the 90.
Oh yeah, very cute.
Dennis and I met through one of the original dating agencies called Yvonne Allen.
I don't like this lining in here. It looks cheap and
we had so many similar interests. I had a background in the clothing industry. He did also.
In our 30s and 40s, life was pretty good for us. We were both reasonably successful. We had a great social life, eating out, meeting friends, travelling, just generally enjoying life wherever we could.
We'd never really thought about having kids. You know, we were having too good a time as just a couple. But we'd seen an ad in the local newspaper for Bernardo's, and it was looking for foster carers. And I thought, well, look, this sounds pretty interesting. You can see these stats here. 17,000 kids. It's pretty good. These are the kids that have been helped. But
Initially, I was not as keen to foster, I guess. I was a bit concerned about whether we really had the ability to deal with young children that might have some difficulties that needed more specialised care.
you know, you're dealing with somebody else's child.
I had some concerns about fostering young boys, being a same-sex couple, only because of what people might think. So my stipulation, they had to be girls.
When John and Dennis told us, it wasn't just all of us, thought they had rocks in their head.
What we say, especially with adolescents, and I don't say with the adolescent carers, we want responsible, nurturing adults.
John and Dennis applied to be carers for our adolescent foster care, and one of the people that did the assessment came back and she said, "Oh, Lynn, I don't know about these two. You know, they're so upmarket and their house is so salubrious. They have these paintings on the wall and all these precious, expensive things." And she said, I said to John, "These could get smashed, you know, they'll get smashed any minute. What are you going to do?" And he said, "They're only things. It's okay." So we thought that was lovely.
It was only a week at most. Bernardo's came back to us and said, "Oh, we've got this young girl who's in need of an immediate home, and it's on a permanent basis until the child is 18. Bernardo's always give you a background briefing of the child. Sarah's past history was not great.
I have some memories of my early years, but none of them are happy. I personally believe I was lucky to walk out alive because my biological mother had something called Munchausen's by proxy, and she liked to break my bones. My biological father abused me. I tried to unsuccessfully tell a number of people to what the extent was of what was happening, but no one ever believed me. Eventually, there was Jessica, who was a Department of Community Services worker, and I one day wrote a letter, and Jessica saw it, and all of a sudden I was living at a refuge, purely because I don't think I could have lasted any longer. With the level of abuse, I don't think I would have. I lived in around 10 foster homes and refuges before I met John and Dennis. Before I moved in, we had a meeting to see if we, clicked.
And she seemed to be, pretty happy that she was going to move. And so finally we were given the nod, okay, you're on.
The environment at John and Dennis's place was a complete 180. And it was happy. And there was no yelling, there was no screaming, there was no slamming doors, there was no violence. It was peaceful. They took me shopping and they bought me the first Harry Potter book, The Philosopher's Stone, and I still have that book. That gift was special because it was the first thing that no one could take off me. It was mine. Someone had bought it for me. And yeah, I love that book. John and Dennis enrolled me in an all-girls Catholic school. I remember the first day of school because I did not want to be there.
Sarah had lost a lot of years, not just months, but years in schooling. And she was absolutely terrified of going to school.
The first day I took her to school, she put her uniform on. I thought everything was looking really rosy, and I took her in a cab, and she got out of that cab and bolted. And I ran the streets of Glee looking for Sarah, and there was a lot of building sites around at the time, and these blokes were on building sites yelling out, "Hey, you've lost your daughter, she's gone that way."
Didn't feel like I could fit in. I had missed out on way too much. I did truly make their lives misery, and it was the running away, it was, the disappearing.
After a few months, we were starting to wonder whether we were the right people for Sarah.
It did create a lot of tension, and it did create a lot of stress on our relationship. Well, the stresses were probably more about how things were dealt with, and we're failing here. We're failing as parents, we're failing as human beings. We've got to educate this young person.
I was thinking maybe we could have done this or that or some other thing, and then John and I would disagree on what we should have done or didn't do or did do. And so it came a little probably complicated.
So I rang the caseworker and I said, "Oh, listen, I think we've got to get out of this, truly."
He just thought, oh, how can I continue to do this? I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. I don't know if I'm helping. And of course he was.
Like a lot of children that come into care, they put you through hoops. There's a trust issue. She had suffered terribly with trust, trusting her parents. So we weren't expecting her to trust us immediately either.
It was extremely hard to accept their warmth, their affection, their, wanting to hug. I was very convinced in my head that they were going to send me back at any stage.
I think it took a long time before she realised, well, we're in here for the long haul. It's probably a good idea that you do trust us. And eventually she did.
They loved me despite all my flaws, despite all the baggage that I brought with me. They loved me.
She went in good.
I was 16 when I left John and Dennis's. I think at 16 I wanted my freedom. So I decided to move out.
Maybe a month or so after Sarah moved out, we were contacted again and asked would we be prepared to take another young person, and without hesitation we actually said yes, we would.
I was born in Sierra Leone, West Africa. I don't really know much about my biological family. I know very little of my dad, a little bit more about my mum. My mother is still in Sierra Leone. I was 4 years old when the war broke out. I remember, having to basically run to the closest swamp in the middle of the night, pretty much just trying to hide out from the rebels, finding you. People took dramatic steps to find shelter. My mother arranged for me to travel with some relatives to a refugee camp in Guinea for about 6 months. Really wasn't a pleasant situation to be in at a young age. We arrived in Australia around about 2000, beginning of 2001, on a refugee visa.
She was living with family friends, but I guess she was a pretty savvy young kid, and she could see what was going on in the community around her.
This is the area that I grew up in. Most of the afternoon after school, I'll come here and spend the afternoon with my mates. Anything to avoid going home. It was just tough seeing these other kids getting raised up differently to how I was. I never felt any comfort, any freedom in the house. It was a very uncomfortable environment for me to live in, where I'll get, beaten up and punished for, things that I would do. And I just kind of realised that this really isn't the life that I should be living. And then I decided that I'm going to go to the police. I walked up and the person asked, can I help you? And I said, yes, my name is Musu. 9 years old, and I don't want to go back home. From then on, I moved into my first foster home with Sandra and Terry Williamson. I was there for a year, and life with them was great. It was really peaceful, but it wasn't going to be forever. It wasn't my long-term placement. When I was told my time there was coming to an end, it was a bit saddening because it meant that I'll have to kind of start again, and I've already created such bond with this family.
Musa was living in one of the outer suburbs of Sydney, and when we first met her, we had to drive there to meet her, and I rocked up in a black convertible. She was quite aghast by it.
Is that really for me? Are they like my new carers? It was just like unbelievable. Like, what is this? They're playing a joke on me.
Musu ran out, jumped in the back and said, "Take me for a ride." We drove around the block with this kid sitting in the back thinking that she was a princess, and that was the start of our relationship. She said, "Yep, I'm moving in with these guys."
John and Dennis had enrolled me to the same school as Sarah.
Whenever we've started new schools, it's always a bit nerve-wracking.
Oh, that uniform, it was horrible. Can you remember when you just put it on, it just draped over you like a sack?
Yes, it was so long. I always wanted to cut mine.
Although Sarah had been to school, we didn't spend a lot of time with the community. I'm not sure how we approach all this, meeting other parents and, being, two men, how's that going to fit as well?
And look, our favourite sport.
I walked into the playground on the first day of Hiwat, my daughter Hiwat's high school. Hiwat is from Ethiopia.
Remember science class?
This is my class.
Oh, those are good days, I think.
John walked me, looks across the field and sees another African child, and he goes, "Look, it's another African child with, a white mum."
And it was really like meeting across a crowded room. We glided towards each other and introduced each other and said, "Oh, hello, how are you?" And both looked at these African children and thought, well, I think we're going to be friends.
He and I and Dennis, we just forged this incredibly laughingly gorgeous relationship.
There she is. There's the birthday girl.
There's the most gorgeous woman in the world.
My friendship with Hiwat started, we had most of our classes together. She would come to my house.
Oh, wow.
They were wonderful men that I was really happy for Hiwat to know. And we had shared many dinners, and then came young Liam.
Camera? Photogenic. At 17, I met a guy and I got pregnant. I very much wanted Liam. I very much wanted to be a mother.
Hello, little man. Are you on television?
I was feeling very overwhelmed by the prospect of being such a young mum, and while I had a massive amount of support, I was just tired.
So we said, okay, we'll take on that challenge, and we did.
Hello.
And suddenly he was living with John and Dennis, and they knew that I was a maternal and child health nurse.
Lindy was able to come and to be an amazing help, and her daughter, Hewat, would come over after school.
No, what cafe? You always go to that one.
No, this one. We used to go for long walks, and we did attract quite a lot of stares, I suppose. Here's 2 African children, half a dozen dogs, Anglo-Saxon man and an Anglo-Saxon woman, and an Anglo-Saxon baby in a stroller. And you did really see people thinking, how did that all come together? You know, who belongs to who, and where are they going? No, there's a cafe up here.
After about 6 months, we realised that Liam was going to be staying with us on a more permanent basis, and we loved having him in our life. We loved him dearly.
Yeah, look, we had decided, after a lot of thought, that we would adopt Liam.
When John and Dennis decided to adopt Liam, I was angry. I was very angry and hurt. Yeah, I was hurt. I trust him. Gosh, I trust him. But I think there's a mixed bag of feelings. I trust him because they adopted him and they gave him a really good life. I consider John my dad, but my son considers him dad. And it's like, oh my gosh, it makes my brain hurt sometimes. And yeah, I wouldn't call it messy, but it's certainly a new dynamic in terms of family.
Something that's special about my family is that we have a lot of nationalities.
Liam is happy to talk to anybody about his family and the fact that he has 2 dads and multiple sisters, even to the extent where he recently was interviewed on a TV program.
I have heaps of sisters. I can't even count. I can't think off the top of my head because there's too many.
We've always thought that it's very important for Liam to know his background, as it is any child that is adopted. So once he started asking questions, I drew a family tree. We've got some very close friends. We've got Donna Peter, we've got Lindy and Hewat. There's a good one of your mum.
You're forgetting Ariana.
Oh, I'm forgetting Ariana. Yeah, she liked coming over for dinner, and we mentored her. Liam's concept of family is wonderful. He embraces everybody that has come into our life. He sees that as family. The other person that we're forgetting here is Caitlin. She moved in after Musu moved out, that's right.
I came to live with John and Dennis when I was 13. I was always struggling in my family situations. I moved around a lot and it was very hard for me to settle in a family environment. To be a part of the sort of family that John and Dennis have was great. The other girls, we were all very close. We all kind of treat each other like we are sisters in a way. We may not be blood, but at the end of the day, you know, we're all there for each other, we all support each other, and we've all built a relationship that's quite strong.
All right, come on, everybody out. Sarah has a significant birthday, so we've decided to get all the family together to celebrate.
We're so diverse. We've got African, Persian, Vietnamese. We've come from around the globe into this one household, a village of all these nations coming together. It's awesome.
And then the reward for us is to see them come back. So the door is always open and they're always coming back. Growing up.
I think that all the kids that we've looked after, they've survived. They're survivors. They've done the work, we've just been there to guide them, and they've popped out the other end pretty decent human beings.
Are they the right shape? Are they perfect? I don't know.
I have a really great job, and I think my life has changed dramatically to what I was when I was 12.
It literally turned into butter. So.
I taught you all these tricks and you don't need to know them anymore.
I think we're all doing pretty well. Like Ariana, she's traveling, living on her own as well. Caitlin, she's studying at TAFE and working at the same time. I work for Telstra. I'm a case manager there, and actually recently just got named Employee of the Month, which was really good. Hayley, she's still at home with the boys and doing great at school. She gets really great results.
Why do you actually spin it?
Because I don't want to wet sell it.
Moving in with John and Dennis is pretty much like winning a car, hitting the jackpot. It's like all of those things rolled into one. You don't get foster carers like John and Dennis.
Oh, so cute!
We've discussed how long we're going to keep fostering, and so we really haven't put a time limit to it. I think whatever we're able to, whatever we can offer a child something and still do it well and meaningfully, then we'll keep doing it.
It has been a remarkable 20 or so years, and I look back and think, well, what would I have been doing in those 20 years? I really can't imagine my life 20 years ago without having these children. And look, this is not the end, I think I'd like them all to be the pallbearers at my funeral. The more the merrier.
We are